This seminar series, during which we've tried to look at impact from a range of perspectives, impact and knowledge exchange. We have looked at a range of disciplines, and we carry on doing this. We've tried to bring together a number of voices from across the higher education sector in the UK, but also internationally. And we've also looked at impact from a range of conceptual and methodological perspectives. So we're interested in capturing and articulating impact on a full range from metrics to very narrative qualitative accounts. In the past few seminars, we've heard from somebody from the HEFKI review, we've heard from HEFKI itself, we've heard from an individual academic about the dilemmas related to academic lives and identity that may arise as you engage with aspects of impact. And we've heard from an international perspective in terms of wider trends and patterns in evaluating research. So today, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Simon Kerridge, who is going to bring yet another layer of perspectives onto these discussions of impact and knowledge exchange. Dr. Kerridge is Director of Research Services at the University of Kent. So you know everything about this mysterious world that is the research services. He is also the chair of ARMA, the Association for Research Managers and Administrators, an association which is very interested in the professional development or the development of research management as a profession. So there's another set of insights from there. You also have a background in computer sciences. So I don't know whether you are planning to bring that to bear onto your discussion of knowledge exchange and impact, but you are very welcome and we're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much. That's my first couple of slides done, so that's good.
Okay.
Great. Sorry. Is that about right level-wise? Perfect. Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much for the invitation as well. I have, 90 minutes now, 85 minutes, but I've been told I should probably leave a few minutes for questions at the end. I'm going to cover, you get the stuff about Kent, you get the stuff about ARMA. I will go over them fairly quickly, don't worry. I'll talk more or less impact what it was in the ref and what it will be in the next ref, might be in the next ref. And probably the important bit that you're all wanting to hear about is how it is that you might have more impact than you otherwise do. I think the plan is questions at the end, but if there's any points of clarification, then shout out and I'll see what I can do. So while you read my lovely little bio there, can I just quickly ask, how many research managers and administrators in the audience? Wow, that's a good showing. How many academics in the audience? And how many others? Sorry. Okay, great. So I'll see what I can get out of that. Great. Okay. You get your slides at Kent, I'm afraid. This is the overview of the view from Kent. There aren't any pictures of the campus because it looks much better looking down the hill than it does up the hill. It's a 1960s thing with concrete. This is, sorry, I'm just remembering, I've got a thing in front of me. So this is just to give you a sort of feeling of the institution. We've got our first students there 50 years ago, the Beatles, I'm sure you recognise. We have one of our honorary graduates, Orlando Bloom, and here's the English one. Do you recognise? No? Not one of our honoraries, one of our actual graduates, E.L. James. Yeah, she didn't graduate in English. And yes, of course, we top everything in various different techniques. We have a number of campuses, which I will just mention because they are quite useful in facilitating impact, which we might come back to later. So main campus in Canterbury, the not quite so nice Medway, although we've got great facilities because space is really cheap there. We've got an old agricultural college. That isn't actually our building in Brussels, which is surprised to know, but we do actually have a building. In Paris we have the floor of a building. In Athens we have something slightly smaller, and in Rome a shed. So, but anyway, the potential to facilitate impact, obviously. Canterbury is there, which is not a million miles from Oxford, which is more or less there, but there's really geography students in. And as you can see, Oxford is top of the slide, top of the world, of course. And there's one of our graduates also being top of the world. That's Harry Hill, and I will be telling some Harry Hill tales later on. Okay. So for the research managers and administrators in the audience, you can go to sleep for the next 2 minutes because you know all about ARMA, I'm sure. And for the academic staff, you can be bored for the next 2 minutes when I'm trying to persuade you how great it is. Really all I need you to know is that there are lots of us, and you're thinking, why are there 2,000 more academics in the world instead of 2,000 research managers and administrators? And hopefully the answer is so that you can spend your time doing research and teaching rather than administration. We're 25 years old, and we've just had a great conference, which unfortunately you all missed. Eyeballs, some of the audience here. We have a lovely little magazine, and that's the kind of the journal with a small J, that's the magazine. And we have a professional development framework, which I'll just later on. And as you can see, we've got a logo for everything. So we've got a logo for our international conference, which we're hosting in 3 years' time now. About 1,000 days, which is scaring us there. So, we have a professional development framework, which is sort of a bit like the AUA professional development framework, but focused down on research management and administration. The text is probably a bit small, so you probably can't see much of it, but this bit here, the translation chunk, one of the 7 leaves, is all to do with knowledge transfer, dissemination, CPD, all those sort of things, which can be pathways to lead to impact. So we're kind of okay on that bit. We also have a chunk on contributing to the REF, which we'll get onto later. We've got reports for funders, so Pathways to Impact, Hefty also a funder. And then these sort of yellowy ones, so helping with proposals, again, proposals and impact, we'll come to why that's important later on. Identifying funding sources, and basically I keep on clicking, and impact is everywhere, is what I'm trying to say here. So it's covered all over the place. And finally, contributing to research policy and strategy, making sure that the university doesn't do anything entirely foolish, which we are not able to support centrally. If you want to do a certificate, then please sign up. We do ad hoc courses as well, so if you're interested in finding out more about how to actually write a case study, then please do come along. I mentioned INOMS 2018, and every 2 years there is an international conference which we'll be hosting in Edinburgh. The next one is in Melbourne, which is about there. I'll have to go to as chair, it's a shame, but what can you do? This map shows where the various research management associations are around the world. You'll notice, for example, that we've got a Norwegian association there, which doesn't have a separate colour because this map is 10 years old and 5 of the associations didn't exist then. So that's kind of how it's developing. So there's also a German one, a Japanese one, and so on. So it is an international thing, and again, in terms of pathways to, routes to impact, having that international dimension is very useful, so I just mentioned it as an icon, if you like. Yeah, okay. Impact, we probably all know about impact. We were all doing it anyway, even though we didn't know it was called impact, or at least our research was being impactful because other people were using it, and eventually it happened outside academia. We kind of probably all heard of Pathways to Impact, and even 20 years ago there was this Realising Our Potential awards scheme, which was a research council scheme as well. So it's been around for a long time. This is perhaps the more recent timeline. I probably should have said, I'm not going to read out everything on the slides because we'll try and leave time for questions at the end. What I'll try and do is pick out the highlights, and the highlight I want to pick out here is, hands up everyone who knew that the various research council institutes did a REF exercise a year before we did, with impact case studies, which are, by the way, published on the web. Okay, yeah, so a few. But yeah, very interesting. And they'll probably be doing it again a year in advance of REF 2020, or maybe 2 years in advance. So, hot tip for looking there, because they're all available on the website, with their scores as well, not individual scores, but the same as that. Okay, so, well, obviously you've got to put in an Oxford reference. The Wikipedia one is, of course, far more important. It's actually, to be fair, is to do with impact assessment rather than impact, but we're talking about how it's going to get assessed later on. RC UK Horizon 2020 had this sort of more inclusive definition of impact, which includes academic impact, and again, that might be something we can discuss at the end, whereas REF specifically excludes academic impact, and this sort of beyond academia, and again, we'll come to the definition of that later on. Just looking back, the kind of the hefty line is your academic impact is captured in your publications and also in what used to be a STEAM but is now rolled into the last part of the environment template. Okay, so that's probably quite an important point, and again I'll major on it a few times. There are some things which lead to impact, are pathways to impact, but are not impact in themselves. So dissemination is one of those things which I shall slate quite a lot, but you have to do because it needs to or can do it. Okay, I've got a whole sort of now series of slides which are a bit repetitive in some ways, but hopefully then the message will sink in after you've been completely bored by my monotone. So it's a change in something outside academia. And there's the important point, demonstrated with evidence. So you can't just say that change has happened, you need to provide the evidence. This is what was before, this is the research that I did, and now that's what happened afterwards. And again, I think everyone around here knows all about the significance of reach. Again, there's a slide later on. Yes, it isn't dissemination. It isn't just how many tweets you've had or how many times you've been on telly. But again, these things can help in terms of this pathway to impact. It isn't to do with whether or not the pathway exists. It isn't prioritised over excellence. You need to have that excellence research to start with. And it isn't separate from research, it's intertwined with research. So again, we'll talk about that later on when we come to a case study. So why is it important? Well, there are 6,975 reasons why it's important, or 6,679 that you can actually access. That's probably, from my point of view, as somebody who works in the university, the most important part. To persuade peers that research is really worthwhile, worth doing, so that potentially we might not get hit too badly in the CSR. Now, we kind of know what that looks like, but we don't know how it's shaken out yet. So that's really very, very important for the UK research sector as a whole. But also showing the value of research to the public out there, because quite often universities get a bad name with really wonderful research projects which people don't quite understand because they just get that one headline figure, the headline text in the Sun or the Mail or whatever. It's also very important, I think, in terms of having a culture change within institutions about helping academics to think about impact, which perhaps some people have been a bit ivory-towered in the past. But at the end of the day, there aren't many academic staff who don't really want their research to have benefit outside. Maybe they're not bothered about doing it themselves, maybe they're bothered about whether it happens in 5 or 10 years, but they really would like to see their work make a difference. So that's really just a reiteration. This is the original ref text. I have now a series of ref slides, which, given the audience, I can probably skip over fairly quickly, so that is my intention to do so. If anybody desperately wants me to, yeah, no, Simon, we've seen these before. Okay, so what I will pick out is the examples which the panels gave. So main panel A, which is sort of the medical sciences, gave lots of things to do with that sort of patients, but they also talk about waste levels and things. I quite like the fact that they've got business performance in there as well. They've thought a little bit outside the box. Main panel B actually thought that the health services business was sort of interesting. Main panel C, the one we're perhaps more interested in here, actually gave some quite useful examples. Main panel D kind of weren't quite sure what the impact was. It'll be fine, we'll do it later on. But no, they all got there in the end. So what I plan to talk about is the case studies. I don't plan to talk about the impact template too much, but I will talk about that chunk there, which is the way in which the institution, the way in which the assessment had helped to support impact case studies, because that really is the meat of what we're here for today, is how do you get better impact. Again, I'm not going to major too much on the details of the case studies, because I think we're all reasonably familiar, but I will go through one later on. Perhaps the important point here is, I always hear, I often hear from my academic colleagues that they're worried that they haven't got impact case studies from the whole breadth of their particular unit of assessment, and they are really worried about that and do tell them and sometimes they believe me. Underpinning research, again, we'll come back to this later on. Types of evidence are more or less covered. The 4 pages, and again we'll go through these in detail as an example rather than this slide, but again hopefully when you have the whole slide back later on it might be useful reference. Does anybody actually understand these criteria? So basically it was really good, it wasn't quite as good, not quite as good as that, really not that good at all, and not much, or wasn't it for some reason. So yeah, entirely uncalibrated. But of course we have the calibration now. But yes, I think the panels find it very easy to produce a rank order, but not to decide where these boundaries should be, and that's been discussed a few times. So this is what an impact case study looks like. It's 4 pages worth, and it's a lovely expandable Word document. These are the sort of things you might need to fill in. I can't see this changing too much next time, although there are some nuances there, which again I will mention. If you get this bit wrong in the form, then you really are in trouble. Unit assessment also, it could be a problem. There were some people moving around a little bit. Top tip for the impact case study. A little bit blasé at this point, but have it begin with something near the start of the end there. Assuming there will be an impact database next time, when you do your research, your searches, they come out in alphabetical order by title. So, there we go. It's a little bit further more impact for next time. ABBA double glazing, all these sort of things. Okay, so this summary of the impact, that text is really too small. You can read it up there. This is probably the bit that you should write last, and this is the same really as the abstract of your paper that you're all familiar with. But don't whittle on about the research, because we really don't care about the research. It's the impact that we're bothered about. I know it's difficult to talk about the impact without the research. Some managed it, but really don't spend 90 words talking about the research. Oh, by the way, there's some impact that you have later on. Sell the impact first of all. This is where you do talk about the research. However, it isn't worth anything. It is just that barrier. So we don't want to spend too much time talking about that. All that can go wrong at this stage is that you convince them that the research wasn't particularly good, wasn't done by you, wasn't done at your institution, and therefore failed to get a grading at all. That didn't really happen though. Similarly, the references to the research, it needs to be 2-star. I've got a slide later on how difficult that is and how many were thrown out because the research wasn't 2-star. Yeah, I probably can't stress this too much. Some of the original impact case studies that I saw, out of the 4 pages, notwithstanding the fact that it says indicative 750 words, were 3 paragraphs after spending 2.5 pages describing the research. It really wasn't very useful. So when you're actually writing those case studies, it's really major on that area. That's the bit that scores the points. All this is just to say, do you meet the threshold? Yes, that's what we score. And then there's the evidence to back up what you said there. So nothing earth-shattering so far. There will be at least one slide which you haven't seen before. I'm not saying which one it is.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Is your microphone on?
Oh, I don't know. Was it? Yes?
I don't know.
There is no,
It is? Oh,
there is no speaker system. So
all right, okay.
we're relying on
Yeah.
I'm probably spending too much time talking that way rather than that way.
That's fine.
Let's try this way. trouble is now I'm looking the wrong way on the screen. Okay, so impact really went rather well. 84% of ref impact was 3-star or 4-star. That's the bit which earned you the money. So I think everyone was really quite happy about that. As I mentioned, we've had nearly 7,000 case studies, and those ones are published on the database, and I know you've all read them all by now. Or at least the ones that you wrote, you'll have reread. Did I say that? And overall, we've got 76%. So as you can see, the impact section there, it scored much more highly than the output section, and was broadly identical to the environment section. Some people have suggested that actually you could score the environment based on what the impact was, so why bother writing all that stuff? Yeah, it could be quite a useful exercise anyway, but we should see. So basically it went well and we liked it. What that means is that 2/3 of the audience around here, the research managers and administrators, are really quite good at writing case studies. The other third, the academics, are also quite good at writing case studies because we got good scores for them. If you want to know what a good one looks like, the impact template generally agreed to be this. This was the how did you approach impact and supporting impact in your unit during the period when you didn't know you were doing it for the first 2 years before you invented the rules. So it was kind of made up. It could be perhaps more useful going forward. On the other hand, the panels said they found it entirely useless. It is quite likely that that is going to disappear next time. But we don't know, of course, there's a consultation coming. If you're desperate to see a great impact case study, then there are a number of submissions, 1786, where they scored 100% of a single item. So there are 40 submissions where they scored 100% 4-star. There are 128 case studies in those submissions, they're 4-star. It's straightforward. You know that those ones were liked by the panels. You will have had your individual feedback on your individual unit's assessment, or if you work in the centre, then you'll hopefully have seen them all. Some of those say, sometimes in as many words, the case study on butterflies was deemed to be world leading. Some said the case study on butterflies was the strongest, and you can see you've got 3-star and 4-star, and so you can tell in quite a lot of them what the score was. Some panels were much better at giving that feedback than other panels. Of course, if you really want to get clever, then you can sort of disaggregate what it was. So if we had an example impact sub-profile with 20% 4-star and 45% and 35%, this whole thing is worth 20% of that 20%. 20% is for the template and 80% for the case studies. So if in the example there were 8 case studies in the submission, because it's easy for me to work out, then 8 case studies between them are worth 10% of this profile, 10% each, and a case study worth 20% of that. So you can tell from that profile, based on the fact that we know that case studies were only scored to the nearest half mark, so you either got a 4-star or a 3-star, or half 4-star, half 3-star, and templates were, in most panels, a single number for the whole template, then you know that this profile here is either 0, 4-star. If it's a 4-star template, there are no 4-star case studies. There are 4 3-star case studies, 1 2.5-star, and 3 2-star case studies, and those are the only 3 options that there are. And again, looking at the case studies, when you read them, you can see the ones which are really quite poor, you can see the ones which are really quite good. So if there are ones that you're interested in, then you might want to get a little spreadsheet out and have a go to see, or is this the best one, is that a 3-star or is it a 4-star? So that could be useful. I think I mentioned the impact database a few times. Has everybody had a look at it? Yes, Simon. Have you had as much time to look at it as you would want? Really? Oh yeah, because you don't want to see it again. It is really well worth a read, particularly if you know what you're looking for, something to do with your case study that you're hoping to develop, put some keywords in, see what else has been put in there. Even if those case studies aren't good, it shows you what's not good to do, and if they aren't good, it gives you some good hints about, oh yeah, well, you can see that questionnaire, or whatever it might be. So that really is top tip. You can read a case study, you can skim it in about 2 or 3 minutes, determine whether it's good or not, because you don't really need to bother about the underpinning research, it's the impact section. So it doesn't take that long. Multiply that by 6,000, and it's only a couple of weeks of your life, sleepless. The other thing you should do is read the subject area reports. Each individual unit of assessment produced a review of the state of the art in the subject, if you like. And of course the confidential feedback which I mentioned, which was about a page or so, but sometimes there are some really interesting vignettes in there about what they liked about your impact. Yeah, and there were loads of workshops and things that you can attend and go to, and I would really suggest workshopping type things where you can sit down and go through something practically. That kind of group learning works very well with impact case studies. Okay, now the slightly exciting bit. What do we know about REF 2020? So, not a lot, really. We know that there are these open access requirements. Again, we can talk about that if you like. It's not really the subject, but 1st of April next year, acceptance of journal article or conference proceeding with ISSN must be open access at point of acceptance. There might be a slight tweak coming out next month, but that's basically what it is. What might we know? What might we think about? We have a consultation coming in the autumn. That is the other thing we know. Let us assume, for the sake of argument, it's going to be REF 2020, because that's a nice and easy to say number, and it's the same period after the last RE and the last REF. The suggestion that I'm making to you is the general rules will be about the same, and I'll talk about some possible tweaks. The timescales will be the same relative, so just moved on by 6 years. Probably for the impact case studies, this time, apart from the information about who to contact, it was all entirely text. King's spent a lot of Hefty's money doing some data analysis. Have we provided that data in the first place in terms of metadata that they wouldn't have to, so who will be providing metadata next time? How much is up for discussion. The same number of case studies, so again I'll talk about that later on, there are some interesting issues there. And will it have the same weighting? Will it still be 20%? It probably seems unlikely, and again I'll talk about why. There probably aren't going to be too many effects on impact from other major overhauls. For example, the suggestion that maybe we don't have to select staff and just submit everybody, but there are some. So, in terms of that sort of overall chunk, academic impact is unlikely to be allowable because it's already covered in your outputs and your environment template. So even if the environment template goes for whatever reason, I think the hefty feeling is, well, you know, you've shown your academic impact by your outputs, that's 65%, why do you need to want to do that in your impact? Impact is impact outside academia. There's also the question about, will that impact travel? So I did the research in my previous institution, I've come to my new institution, I would like to be able to say that the impact from that research should be allowable. No, it isn't allowable, and again I can't see that changing because, again, it's that tension between publications travel. If impact travels as well, then you just increase the likelihood of that football transfer sort of issue just before the closing deadline. Continuing impact is another one. We had this impact case study last time. Can we have the same one next time? Well, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to, because it's not the same. How would you tell if it's the same anyway? Maybe the same underlying research, but you're not playing the same impact. Maybe you've done some more research since then. I can't see why you wouldn't be allowable, but we'll find out. Will the evidence need to be more robust? Yes, it will be. I think some impact case studies score quite highly when not all of the claims were evidence, but a high proportion of them were. The various panel feedback forms showed that the average time to impact was between 3 and 9 years, with social sciences actually being the quickest. It's possible that that might increase just because we've been recording things for longer, so we can build on longer evidence train. And the longer you've had, then potentially the better your impact is. But yes, something needs to be done though, because we've done really quite well at impact. If we all do better, then everybody will get 100% 4-star, and it's not worthwhile having it because there's no discrimination. We all like 100% 4 stars, but yes, you understand the point. Okay, so timescales. There was a lot of discussion about, well, maths takes longer, but basically everyone finally agreed on the same timescales. I don't see any reason why that is likely to change. Everyone was relatively happy with that. Apart from, interestingly, the Research Council Institutes do have a little bit longer. So we just moved everything forward by 6 years, so underpinning research anything from January 1999 to December 2019, again assuming that at least that six-year period where the impact can take place, or rather 5.5-year period, because the impact is only until the end of July. So the impact itself, January 2014 to July 2019, would be my best guess. If that's the case, we're over a quarter of the way through the period already, so you will have collected a quarter of your evidence already. Of course, we have Simon. 1st of January 2014, after we hit the submit button, what we did was we went away and we did a baseline everything we thought was going to be impactful next time, and we're ready to go. Yes, it will be great. Okay. And I suppose the other thing to mention there is that given this, the research is more likely to be done already, or at least underway. And so it's all very well having this grand plan for how we do things going forward, but we're also interested in, well, what can I do in a sort of project in trend, or what can I do with research that's happening to try and build that impact. In terms of the format, 4 pages, generally okay. Some people wanted more, but they've got to be read, and it's a good process in honing things down. At the moment, there's this issue about the license under which you give it to Hefty, so they can publish it so that you can use it. So I think they'll specify this time that you have to provide it on an open access license, and reusable license. There will be some metadata required. I'm sure at least the DOIs for journal articles referencing underlying research will be required. Potentially more might be required. Yes, types of impact. Again, you've probably all seen the King's report with all the diagrams, which I have got somewhat later on. There are 60 types of impact, and maybe depending on the type of impact, there are sort of things that you could provide in terms of quantitative data. Maybe that can be provided as metadata so that things can be easier to judge when you've got two things that look roughly the same. And you can see that this one has added £1 million worth of investment, that one's added £100 million worth of investment. You can clearly see that information rather than having to read through the text to find it. I suspect that's likely. The downside of that is, of course, that as soon as you say this metadata is interesting, then in your mind you think, oh, other metadata isn't interesting, and therefore they aren't going to look at that. So there are some tensions there. And similarly on the evidence side of things as well. I haven't mentioned orchids yet, but one suggestion is that maybe people should be given identifiers, and I'll come on to that later on as well. Maybe organisational identifiers could be used, and that would make analysis of where impact has happened much easier. You won't be surprised to know that there were 20-odd instances of different instantiations of British Telecom in the various impact case studies, and it's quite useful for British Telecom to know as a whole what those are without having to sort of bring them together manually. Okay, case studies then, the number of them. There were a minimum of 2 required last time, up to just below 15 staff submitted. When you got to 15 staff submitted, you need 3 case studies, all the way up to 24.99, and then you need 4 case studies and so on. The question sort of that then arises in my mind is, well, if you had 14 staff and 2 case studies, then that was fine. But what if you didn't have a viable 3rd case study, but you did have a viable 15th member of staff? Would you say, we'll submit that member of staff because our EDI policy on staff selection says that we should do, but we know we're going to get an unclassified for 1 out of 3 case studies, which is 5% of our overall profile, then would we do that? Maybe that's an interesting question, I don't know. So, here is my little diagram. This is information from the RAE 2008, and so these are 12% of UOA submissions to the RAE were either 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 staff, and similarly just under 10%, so 9% were 14 or 24 or 34 or 44 staff. So these are the numbers at the end, if you like. It's a relatively nice curve going down, which is sort of expected. There are more smaller departments than there are larger departments, and therefore that's the sort of graph you'd expect. Now, if you remember the cut-off point for case studies is the 14.99 to 15 or 24 to 25 and so on, and this is what the graph for the ref submissions look like. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may notice the graphs aren't quite the same, and there is a fairly large peak with just under that impact case study threshold, and one might say a bit of a trough just afterwards. Now, I don't know about you, but that might have implications for reporting diversity. I'm not quite sure. The reason for it is, and again, here's the Kent example. So my favourite one is pharmacy. We submitted 65 outputs. Outputs were worth 65%, therefore each output was worth 1%. Because we had 16.3 FTE staff, there were 3 case studies, therefore each case study worth 80% or 20% were worth a third of 16, so 5.33. So each case study was worth 5.33 outputs, and so on all the way down. And there are different ways of doing the averages, but basically each case study was worth between 2 and 8, and on average about 6 outputs. So you can see why even adding 4 4-star outputs wouldn't be as good as a 4-star case study that you're losing out on. If we were to up the percentages, then of course that just makes these ratios even worse if the outputs stay the same. So that's a potential problem with upping the percentage from back. So how do we resolve this? Well, more case studies of course would do it. You'd still have that drop, but you'd have it at 0 and 5, but it wouldn't be as big a peak, because we'd all like to have more case studies, wouldn't we? You could give a lower weighting to case studies, but I can't see Biz being happy with that. You could give a finer-grained assessment rather than saying you can have 3 or 3.5 and 4, have 3.2 and 3.7, then that makes it a little bit more palatable to have that cliff edge, because you're not definitely getting an ungraded, you might be 1.7 or whatever. You can have fewer outputs. We're probably not overjoyed with that idea either. Or you could somehow remove the linkage between case studies and FTE, but I'm not quite sure how you would do that, but I have heard people have to suggest that they might be able to do that. So, more case studies would be more burdensome. How much more burdensome? I mean, notwithstanding the fact that we maybe don't like writing case studies, our corporate comms department love them because they all go on the website with many pictures and things, and they all like things to put in the research directories. Biz would be very happy. It will help discriminate at the top, because if you've got more case studies, fewer of them are likely to be at the top, fewer proportion. Of course, you can always change the discrimination at the top by adding in a 5-star or a 6-star or a 7-star. That makes things uncomparable with last time, so that's good and bad, but different reasons. It means it's easier to sell the continuing impact because there are more case studies, and so even if all of the continued still needs some new ones, you reduce its cliff edge. But of course, it adversely affects the grade profile, so it will look like we have done worse in impact in 2020 than we did in 2014. So, okay, as you will probably recall, originally it was due to be worth 25%. It was argued down to 20% because it was untried. So the top tip until about a few months ago was, i.e. after we got the panel feedback, was that it will probably be worth 25% next time. The other option though is to get rid of the impact template, keep the numbers the same, and then therefore the case studies will be worth 20% rather than 16%. So they get the same increase without actually increasing. So the impact case study is worth more, but impact is still worth the same. Of course, you could do both, but I think that's unlikely because that means that case studies will be worth 56% more. So 25% compound. Original bank account did that. Okay, there are some various other factors. So might we have to not select staff, but just submit all staff? And all that means then is that you select staff contracts, I suppose. Publications might not be directly linked to 4 per staff, but it might be, if you had 10 staff, submit 40 publications, but they don't have to be linked to not 4 each, but at least 1 each, let's say. And they say there's a suggestion that maybe the impact case study numbers might be linked from FTE, but as I say, I'm not sure how. Things which didn't really happen much last time were we did joint research. We want the same impact case study, so Kent did some stuff with UCL. We both wrote our impact case studies entirely separately, and maybe we'd be a bit smarter if we worked together on those. I'm not going to talk too much about impact metrics, but maybe there's an option for putting some impact metrics into the environment if the impact template is going in there. How much external income have you had from companies specifically, for example. Okay, again, I'm not going to talk about this report, but it comes out on the 9th of July. Do go to the Wellcome Trust, I'm sure it's going to be a great day, and I can hear James Wilsden talking beautifully about it. Do you like the really bleak landscape? If you do want to read it but can't go to the Wellcome Trust, it's going to be on the website. The current report structure is this. The thing I want you to take away from that is this notion of responsible metrics, which is the, use metrics, but use a basket of metrics, and make sure you understand what the shortfalls are like. They don't work if the citations particularly well in social sciences and work particularly poorly in the nonsense. Okay, let me just see. Okay, time-wise, not too bad. We're about 25% way through the slides, so we'll speed up a little bit. I don't think there's anything I want to pick out on a particular slide, so we will move on. An example of something in the metrics report, which I said I wasn't going to talk about, is that there's a suggestion that ORCIDs should be mandated for rep submission. That's really not specifically to do with impact, but it is to do with uptake of unique identifiers in the UK, so that if you do produce metrics and potentially metrics for impact going forward, maybe 2026 or 2032, then if you split your risk at 2032, looking forward to that, then at least the metrics stand a chance to be robust because they are associated with you, John Smith, not your mate up the street, John Smith. Okay, the bit that you maybe came to the talk to find out about. So, we know the ref rules now. I may go over them again because I enjoy them so much. You need to know what a good case study looks like. There are plenty there. There's 128 4-star ones, and they are all pretty good. Well, sorry, there are a lot more 4-star ones, but 128 newer 4-star. Yeah, okay. I think I've mentioned on this point quite a lot. If that's the one take-home message, when you're writing it, write the impact bit. Research is taken as read, obviously. Think about what the impact might be, how you might measure it, how you might enable it, who do you need to engage with to enable that, and remember to record absolutely everything. There will be a questionnaire at the end of this talk where I shall ask you how much has changed your life on the way out. So, okay, we know how it was assessed, we know how it was judged, and we know that reach isn't geographic, but most of the panels were quite keen on knowing what the potential reach was, how many people have leprosy, what proportion of those were affected by intervention. Just again, I'll just leave these slides with you, but basically dissemination, not impact, effect on audiences is impact. Similarly, this is the academic question one, research, impact on research, not impact on the ref, impact on something not researched in your HCI, not impact. Impact on not research, i.e., let's say 100 universities teaching curriculum, then that is impact. It may not be brilliant impact, but it is impact. The other obvious thing, you do research, it might have impact over a long period, but you can only claim the bit in the ref period. And again, if you imagine how impact might develop as policy goes to legislation, goes to implementation, and then actually improves things, then all of these things are impact, but something up here is more likely to score highly than something down here. Okay, we can skip over that. It's quite a nice short slide, so I'll skip over it, but not very quickly. This was key reflections from a panel member from Kent in the way in which the religious studies group, theology and religious studies, clinical religious studies, religious studies. So they were most impressed by how you worked with your partners, how you enabled that research to have impact, what networks you used, and how it was responded to. Was it visible? Was it seen? So not so much evidence of impact, but evidence of the fact that impact had happened. And again, how far along are you in that diagram of the 5 squares later on? 5 squares? Excellent, I think they were. And what has happened outside the HEI? You don't need to drive all that impact yourself. Okay, so I will quickly go through an impact case study. Obviously it's a 4-star, I wouldn't bother you with anything else. This is the abstract part of it. It's from history, it's to do with medical ethics. Just to highlight out the key points, it says it's to do with mediation, conversation, and reconciliation, so we get an idea of roughly what it's to do with. And this was the group affected, bottom down, where they did lots of testing of horrible noxious gases after the war. And this was the route to impact. This is how the research had an impact through legal cases. Oh look, lots of people, lots of money, so I'm quite liking it already. And an apology from the government. That's pretty rare actually, so I quite like that. And sort of we got this public understanding in the history, and that's quite good, but I highlighted it afterwards because that's the meat. And lots of people going to do and see things. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of read that, and I think, do you know what, I'm quite impressed already. Is there any reason why I should write this down? So, you then have the research. Obviously, you wrote a lot about research, because you don't like research, so what I'm going to pick out from here is the important bit, which was, he was at Kent during this time and during those positions. It doesn't actually say at Kent, and it really should do. That should be added for this to be perfect. It has some funding, Welcome Trust, sounds good. And here's a nice big meaty output which is referenced later on. So his main findings were, and in particular in relation to the impact, his findings were, I'm going to read through them, but those are sort of the key points, the structure if you like. So this is section 3, the evidence of the research, the outputs if you like. So there's that Nuremberg book, and here are a couple of journal articles, and they are, by the way, in your ref pack, so when you read this, you'll have probably read those, and you'll be happy that it's 2-star because you're going to read them anyway. And a couple of Welcome Trust things. It's kind of 2-star, it's at least 2-star, we're sold. That's probably far too much information there, but you can't find much less. So details of the impact, which of course I couldn't put on one slide because it's so long, it's the meat, and again, it's what you're expecting. We come clean. The impact started before, but culminated in 2010, so we've got a chunk of it. So this is all the stuff to do with what happened before, so in effect, this is the pathways to, this is the how it happened. There is some impact in there, but it happened before 2008, therefore it doesn't count. And again, we reference back to those, these are the corroborating evidence in section 5, so you can see quite clearly how that can be checked by the panel. So this is the important bit, or one of the important bits. This is the actual impact we're claiming. So we've got a 3 million settlement, and there's the evidence to go and check it out. Major beneficial impact. But you've got to help the panels. And okay, 360 claims, another 4.7 million, more money, and more money. And I don't know about you, but that makes me think that we're on top of it because we know exactly how much. We didn't just read it somewhere. And there we are. There's that summary figure that we talked about to start with. And there's the evidence. Should you wish to go and check it out. And a nice little soundbite there to say that it wouldn't have happened without So, straightforward. We then also have this other chunk of impact, which is increase in footfall, and there's the corroborating evidence. 73 people attended a panel session. Again, it's a number, it's actual information, and some stuff. There was loads of external stuff. And again, that's not hugely important. It's just this other aspect of it to give the rounded case. There we go. Summary, takeaway. You can just read that. You'll be fine. So this was the section 5, corroborating evidence. There's a statement there, there's a statement there, there's a statement there, and there's contact details to find out that person. So, I don't know, I've gone over it very quickly. I'm fairly convinced by reading that, I've read it a few times, that it's a 4-star, it's pretty good, you could have done much better. So, but it was the structure that's important there, and the words, if you like. Okay, I've got a slide which says this quite a few times. The thing that I'm going to highlight here is demonstrate that it was 2-star research. There was a lot of machinations. Okay, is it 2-star? How do we show it's 2-star? Well, 95% of the outputs submitted were 2-star. You would be unlucky to select something which wasn't going to give you 2-star if it's a reasonable average. Yes, okay, impact's an important bit. So one of those diagrams where the hand is the really big bit because it's got all the sensors in. That's what we need to concentrate on writing stuff. Okay, so that's the output, and kind of how do we get there? Well, there's a suggestion that you can just sit back, wait for it to happen, but how do you know what's happened unless you're involved? Maybe you've done your research, and this is perhaps where we are at the moment, and you might want to develop some extra things on top of that, some workshops to bring in some potential users and find out what it is that they like about it and don't like about it, and perhaps help them, make them understand what your research is and how they might use it. Or, even better, have users involved at the start. Some pieces of research do that anyway. Some you could do that if you thought about it, and then work with them to generate impact. If they're the users wanting to use the results of your research, they will do all the work for you because they want this change to happen, and you're just involved from the get-go. So this is kind of how it used to be. You got the money, you write some outputs, they were cited, and then eventually somebody outside academia will see your citations and do something with it. Now, think about it at the start. Don't just do academic outputs. Think about other disseminations in trade journals, for example. Get yourself on the telly, whatever it is, and do impact. But you do need this kind of supporting layer of how does your institution, how does your department help you record those things. So another little diagram. Instead of having projects which produce things, perhaps sort of just think the other way round and put your impact in the middle and think about all the things that you might gather together in order to be able to produce your impact case study. Because you're probably not going to write it now. You're probably going to write it in 3 years' time when you've forgotten all about it, so you need to make sure you've gathered all the evidence. You may be written the proto one. So again, just an example. And again, these are examples from the University of Coventry, where they have particular systems, but you can translate these into your own institutional systems quite easily. Yes, important slide here is there is no single way to do impact. Having said that, perhaps I would suggest some single. And the other thing is, don't forget about this potential for serendipity. And it is trying to keep track of anything and everything that's going on outside the academia, if you like, where they might be referencing your work or something you've talked about. So, okay, you're aiming for a case study. We don't need to remind ourselves what's needed for the ref, but what we do need to think about is what might lead to impact and how might we gather that. So, I won't talk about that, and I won't talk about that other than to say, my rule of thumb, if the research is in a journal I've heard of, then it's probably 2-star. Was it funded by RC UK? Yeah, 2-star. So don't worry about that too much. Just this is the really important thing. Was it done at your HEI? The publication may have come out when your member of staff was at your institution. Sometimes the address can be their new institution before they even arrive. If publication came out 6 months after they arrived, was the research done at your institution? Some impact case studies got 0 or classified for that reason. Okay, probably. There's a set of slides here, and I'll just make it clear so that when you're reading or I'm wittering on, the misconceptions are academic impact is impact. Obviously, that is a misconception, so these are all negative statements. This is one which was a big issue at Kent. Academics really felt they had to be the one doing or involved in the impact. And the best impact is probably that when it has been taken on completely outside academia, unless they've got a spin-out company. So it's having those networks, having those links. And really don't spend too much time saying how great it's going to be in the future, because that's the future. Yeah. Another obvious thing is the corroboration. A lot of initial case studies that I saw said, contact XYZ for more information about visitor numbers. Yeah, great. So this bit of evidence shows increased footfall. Well, great, how much? They're not actually going to go and ask, say what it is, and even better, say what it is in terms of something that's actually affected the way in which people go. Extra numbers isn't as good as extra revisits because people have gone back because they've been in some way changed or to maybe they don't understand it. But anyway. Okay, so that's more or less the order in which things happen, but not necessarily. I can't really stress this enough. Involve users in your research design. There is a bit of an academic freedom issue here, but if you're wanting something to have impact, talk to people who your research might have impact on to see what it is that they would like your impact to have. Is that quite right wording there? But get those user groups involved. There were a number of impact case studies that scored really highly because they had done that. Even halfway through the project, well, actually, we haven't quite produced the sort of research which is useful to you, but we found out what was useful to you, then done a little bit more research in that area, and therefore that has become useful. And so it was that kind of reflective, is this actually what people want? So it's maybe stepping outside your comfort zone a little bit. Right, okay, I will probably wrap up fairly soon, because I have done too many slides and spent too much time at bidding. Sorry guys. So I will quickly flip through and give you a flavour of what you've missed, and then maybe that can include in your questions. Okay, gather evidence. Yes, I am, notwithstanding the fact that dissemination is an impact, if you are out there and know, you're more likely to be picked up by the people who will do something with your stuff and make the impact happen. I think I mentioned that before. And this effect on others, does this change your perception of? I was sort of joking about the questionnaire at the end, but if you've got an activity and you can do something extra to get people's feedback, then do that. You can't do that 3 days later, but you can do it at the time, or when you can the survey measures. Okay, again, I'll leave the slides with you. Yeah, keep everything. But you may need to do some more research or some more stuff which isn't really research but impact digging up generation. And you might have to do some fairly diplomatic stuff. There were a number of companies who didn't want to be involved in impact case studies, notwithstanding the fact that they were promised to be confidential and or not published at all. They didn't want the panel members seeing certain things. Okay, I'll talk about section 4, reiteration. Yeah, don't come. Engage users from the start. Okay, we've talked about that. I've talked a little bit about social media and just getting yourself known. Talked about potential metadata requirements here, but think about what you might need and get that. Yeah, store your evidence in a reliable and easy to use place. Yes, we don't have one of those. I'm sure Oxford does. And I don't mean under your desk. And you may have a research management system which might have extensions for storing things within that. Okay, examples we don't need to talk about. This is about the 7th in summary slide, and there's still more to go. Sorry about that. So, building networks, internal and external, involving stakeholders. Can't stress that enough. So, this was your takeaway question, but I'll give you the answer, don't worry. So read the impact report. It's lovely, it's great. Look at the database. Work out who it is that your research might impact on, and go and talk to them. Maybe think about your media, social media, or engagement strategies in your department, and think about how you can actually do that translation. Also, talk to each other about it. There are other pairs of eyes there. So there is the obligatory diagram which you've all seen before about lots of different research areas, the units of assessment and the 60 impact topics. Here is the other diagram which you'll see a lot of, and that little blob there is the history and law and justice one where the Portland Down case study comes from. I guess what I'm saying is that maybe being here might be a bit boring, and doing something a little bit different might excite the panels. So, about that, references, you see, hang on, yeah, it's going there, almost. Again, those will be on slide pack. Questions? Yeah, that's probably about it.